There's a special kind of vulnerability you feel when you wake up in the middle of the night and realize you can't move. You tell yourself it's just sleep paralysis, a waking nightmare. But nightmares aren't supposed to leave footprints in the morning. It was my first time living totally alone. I was 23, and I'd just gotten a job that paid just enough to get a small one-bedroom apartment on the edge of the city. It was a third-floor walk-up in one of those old pre-war brick buildings, the kind with charming little flaws that a realtor would call character. The floors creaked in a way that always made it sound like someone was walking in the other room, even when you knew you were alone. The old steam radiators would hiss and clank like they were trying to tell you secrets. And the windows, the original single panes, would rattle every time the wind blew hard. I honestly loved it. It felt like my own little fortress, a space that was all mine. The building was squeezed between a 24-hour laundromat and a little family-owned bakery. In the morning, my place would fill up with the smell of fresh bread, and at night, the clean scent of warm laundry would drift up. It was comforting. For the first couple of months, life fell into a simple, predictable pattern. I'd work, come home, make a simple dinner, and usually just fall asleep on the couch watching something mindless. My apartment was my sanctuary. It was old, sure, but it felt safe. The main door to the building had a heavy lock that made a satisfyingly loud thunk, and I was religious about using the deadbolt on my own door. My bedroom was tiny, just big enough for a bed, a dresser, and a nightstand. The bed was pushed against the wall across from the door. To the left was the only window, which looked out onto the fire escape and the brick wall of the next building over. I always kept the blinds down, not because I was worried about privacy 3 floors up, but because the orange glow of the streetlights filtering through cast this warm, ambient light that I found really soothing. It meant the room was never truly pitch black. The night it happened started out like any other Tuesday. It was late fall, and the air was getting that crisp, cold bite to it that just makes you want to curl up inside. I remember making a cup of tea and just standing by the living room window, watching people hurry home from work. The city had its usual soundtrack of distant sirens and traffic. There was nothing out of the ordinary, no weird feeling in the air. It was just a quiet, boring Tuesday night. I cleaned up the kitchen, double-checked the lock on my door out of habit, and went to bed around 11. I fell asleep almost right away, wrapped in my comforter, feeling completely secure in my little corner of the world. The hissing radiator was a familiar rhythm, and the soft orange glow from the window was like a nightlight. I felt safe. I felt alone. I was wrong. I didn't so much wake up as I surfaced. It was this slow, thick climb from deep sleep into a hazy kind of awareness. My dream, whatever it was, just dissolved, leaving this lingering sense of unease behind. The first thing I noticed was the silence. The normal hiss and clank of the radiator was gone. The apartment was dead quiet. The only sound was this faint, high-pitched ringing in my ears. Then I tried to roll over, and I couldn't. My body felt like it was encased in concrete. My arms, my legs, everything felt impossibly heavy, pinned to the mattress by some invisible, crushing weight. I tried to lift my head, but my neck wouldn't listen. I tried to wiggle a finger, a toe, nothing. A jolt of pure, animal panic shot through me. My heart started hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the suffocating quiet. I could feel the fear telling my body to move, to run, but nothing was working. My limbs weren't mine anymore. My eyes, though, they could move. They darted around the room, scanning the familiar orange-tinted shadows, the dresser, the closet door, cracked open, like always, the outline of the window. Everything looked normal. It's just sleep paralysis, I told myself. The thought was a lifeline. I'd read about it online. Your brain wakes up before your body does, so you're temporarily paralyzed. It's common. It's harmless. The panic, the dread, it's all just your brain misfiring. You just have to wait it out. Relax. Breathe. So I focused on my breathing. It was the only thing I could control. Inhale. exhale. The air felt thick and heavy, and each breath was a struggle. The pressure on my chest was intense, like a huge animal had decided to go to sleep on top of me. A classic symptom, I reminded myself. Just a hallucination. But then, the feeling in the room started to change. The air got cold, a deep penetrating cold that had nothing to do with the autumn night. It felt like a pocket of frozen air had just settled in my room, and with the cold came a feeling it's hard to describe. It was that primal sense of being watched. An ancient alarm bell started screaming in the back of my mind that I was not alone. This wasn't just some neurological glitch anymore. This was a presence. My eyes snapped to the foot of my bed. In the dim orange-filtered dark, there was a shape. It was vague at first, just a pillar of shadow that was somehow darker than the other shadows. A trick of the light, I desperately tried to tell myself. My eyes are playing tricks on me because I'm scared. It's a hallucination, the intruder they talk about in the articles. I blinked hard, trying to clear my vision, trying to make the shadow turn back into a chair or a pile of clothes. But it didn't disappear. It got clearer. The shadow was tall, impossibly tall. It seemed to stretch from the floor almost to my 9-foot ceiling. It was thin, almost skeletal, but it had a definite shape. A head, a long torso, 2 spindly arms hanging at its sides. It had no features at all, just a silhouette cut out of a black that was darker than the night. And it just stood there, at the foot of my bed, perfectly still. That stillness was the most terrifying part. It wasn't the stillness of an object. It was the coiled, patient stillness of a predator. My mind was just a screaming mess of denial and pure terror. This isn't real. It can't be real. Wake up! Wake up! I tried to scream, to force any sound out, but all I could manage was this tiny, choked gasp. It was like shouting into a pillow. No matter how hard I tried, the paralysis just swallowed the sound. I was a prisoner in my own body, forced to just lie there and stare at this impossible thing that had invaded my sanctuary. I focused all my willpower on moving my right hand. I pictured my fingers twitching. I could almost feel them moving, but my real hand was still like a stone on the mattress. The feeling of helplessness was absolute. My body had completely betrayed me. Then, it moved. It just tilted its head, a slow, deliberate motion. The gesture was so human, but it was coming from this completely inhuman shape. It was a gesture of curiosity, like it was inspecting me. I couldn't see any eyes, but I could feel its gaze, this cold, analytical focus that felt like it was stripping me bare. It knew I was awake, and it knew I was terrified. And then, I heard the sound. It was quiet, almost too quiet to hear over my own heart. A soft, wet, clicking sound, like a tongue clicking against the roof of a mouth, but slicker. It was a biological sound, an organic sound, and it was utterly alien. Click, pause, click. It was rhythmic, almost like it was talking. It was coming from the shadow. That sound just shattered what was left of my rational mind. The fragile little wall I'd built with words like hallucination and sleep paralysis just crumbled. Hallucinations don't make sounds. They don't make the air turn to ice. This was real. Whatever this thing was, it was physically in my room. The terror just went supernova in my head. Every instinct was screaming at me to do something. I squeezed my eyes shut, like a little kid hiding from a monster. If I can't see it, it can't see me. The clicking continued, steady, unbothered. Then I felt something new, a vibration through the mattress. It was subtle, but it was there. The floorboards were creaking under its weight. It was moving around the bed. It was coming closer. I don't know if I passed out or if my brain just snapped. One second I was drowning in terror, positive I was about to die, and the next, I was jolting upright in bed, gasping for air like I'd just been pulled from underwater. My body was mine again. I could move. I scrambled backward until my back hit the headboard, my breath coming in ragged sobs. I slammed my hand on the lamp on my nightstand, flooding the room with light. It was empty. The shadow was gone. The cold was gone. The only sound was the familiar hiss of the radiator, which had decided to kick back on. I sat there for what felt like an hour, heart pounding, drenched in cold sweat, just staring at the empty space at the foot of my bed. I checked my phone. $3 I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I just sat there, with the light on, back against the headboard, until the first gray light of dawn started to creep in. I had to believe it was just the most vivid, terrifying nightmare of my life. The alternative was just too much to think about. Morning came, not with relief, but with this dull, throbbing exhaustion. The bright sunlight felt harsh, almost like an accusation. I felt stupid. Last night's terror seemed so dramatic in the light of day. It was just a night terror, a really bad one. I kept repeating that to myself as I forced myself out of bed. Just a dream. I went through my morning routine on autopilot. I made coffee, but the familiar smell did nothing to calm my nerves. I walked through the apartment, checking the locks on the door and window for what felt like the 10th time. Everything was locked up tight, no sign of a break-in. It had to have been in my head. I felt this wave of relief, but also embarrassment. I let my imagination get the best of me in a new, creaky apartment. It was almost a cliché. I finished my coffee and went back to the bedroom to get dressed. I was running on nothing but adrenaline and caffeine, but I was determined to just put the night behind me. My bedroom, filled with morning light, looked completely normal, harmless. I grabbed my clothes from the dresser and turned to leave. And that's when I saw them. The floor in my bedroom was that old, dark-stained hardwood. It was always covered in a thin layer of dust that I was always meaning to clean up. And right there, in the middle of the dusty floor, were footprints. My blood ran cold. I just stood there, frozen, in the doorway. They weren't my footprints. I hadn't walked over there. They were perfectly clear in the dust, and the path they made was chilling. They started near the wall by the window, a solid brick wall, no door. Two prints, side by side, like someone had just appeared there. From that spot, they walked in a direct line to the foot of my bed, right where the shadow had been standing, and then they circled around the side of the bed, to the exact spot where I'd heard the clicking and felt the floorboards creak. They stopped right beside where my head would have been on the pillow. I knelt down, my hands trembling. I didn't want to look closer, but I had to. The prints were not human. They were long and narrow, with 3 skinny pointed toes, almost like a bird's, but way too big. And where a heel should have been, there was just a single deep circular mark. But the most terrifying part was what they were made of. It wasn't just dust. Each footprint had this dark, damp, oily look to it, like they'd been left by something wet. I reached out and touched the edge of one. It was cold and greasy, and it smelled faintly of stagnant pond water and rot. I followed the trail again with my eyes. They led from the solid wall to the foot of the bed, around to the side, and then they just ended. There were no tracks leading away. No footprints heading back to the wall or out my bedroom door. They simply stopped. My whole world just tilted. Every rational explanation, every desperate attempt to dismiss it as a dream, it all just evaporated. This was physical evidence. This was proof. Something had been in my room. It had stood over me while I was paralyzed and helpless. It had watched me. And it was not human. It wasn't a nightmare that left these tracks. Nightmares don't leave footprints. I felt sick. I stumbled backward, away from the prints, clapping a hand over my mouth. My mind just couldn't process it. The prints don't lead out. The thought just kept circling and circling in my head. Did that mean it was still here, hiding somewhere, just waiting for me to be vulnerable again? My survival instinct just took over. I didn't grab my wallet, didn't grab my keys. I bolted. I ran out of the bedroom, through the living room, fumbled with the deadbolt, and just scrambled out into the hallway, slamming the door behind me. I didn't stop running until I was on the sidewalk outside, standing in my socks, just gasping in the cold morning air. I called my best friend, my voice a shaky, high-pitched mess. I tried to explain, but it all came out as a jumble of words about shadows and sleep and footprints. To her credit, she was patient, but I could hear the confusion in her voice. She probably thought I was having a breakdown. She told me to go to a coffee shop, to just sit down and breathe, and that she'd meet me. Sitting in that bright, noisy cafe, surrounded by people just living their normal Tuesday morning, I felt like I was in a different reality. I tried to explain it all again to my friend, even showing her the blurry pictures I'd frantically snapped on my phone before I ran. The lighting was bad. You could see the prints, but they could have been anything. A smudge, a water stain. She looked at them, then back at me with this look of pure sympathy. She suggested I was just exhausted, stressed out from the new job. She gently suggested that maybe I'd spilled something and tracked it in without realizing it. She was trying to be nice, but all her rational explanations just made me feel more alone, more crazy. She didn't believe me. I knew nobody would. I never spent another night in that apartment. I broke the lease, paid the fee, and put everything in storage. I couldn't even make myself go back inside to pack. I paid movers to do it all, just telling them what to do over the phone. I crashed on my friend's couch for a month before I found a new place. A modern, characterless high-rise with no creaky floors or hissing radiators. I wish I could tell you there's a neat ending to this story, but there isn't. I never found out what that thing was or what it wanted. I've spent more hours than I can count online, looking for similar stories, for any explanation that fits, but I've never found anything that really explains those oily, three-toed prints that started at a solid wall and ended right beside my bed. It's been years, but the fear has never really gone away. It's just this quiet, constant thing in the back of my mind. I don't get sleep paralysis anymore, but every single time I wake up in the dead of night, for any reason, the very first thing I do is look at the foot of my bed. I just stare into the shadows, my heart pounding, half expecting to see that tall black silhouette standing there, patiently waiting, watching me. Has anything like this ever happened to you? Have you ever woken up and seen something that just shouldn't have been there? Tell me your story in the comments. I read every single one. And if you want to hear more stories that walk that line between nightmare and reality, make sure to subscribe. You never know what's waiting for you in the dark.